We're talking about some of my favorite undervalued running backs in the later rounds heading into 2023. Yes, I know we most often refer to these players as sleepers, but I just don't think there's such thing as a sleeper really anymore. So I think it's better to call these guys undervalued running backs. But, for the clicks and for the brand, we have to call them sleepers. So off my soapbox, let's get it started. So first things first, let's talk about Antonio Gibson, who's coming off the board at RB 33 or 88th overall. I think there's a lot to like here in the profile for Antonio Gibson. Now I get it, people that have drafted him in years past, he's been okay. He hasn't been great, and yes, he's more often let people down. But I think this is a different situation because of where he's being drafted. He's no longer being drafted early like he was last season. If you look at how he performed last year, it wasn't necessarily great. It wasn't terrible either. 47% of the snaps, 43% of the opportunities, but he did have a 12% target share and 58 total targets, which was 12th most among all running backs. And I think that's at the very least the baseline of really liking him really starts. I think he's going to be heavily utilized in the passing game this year. If you look at Eric Bieniemy, who's coming over as the offensive coordinator, I think you can take away some stuff that the Chiefs did and how they utilized Jerick McKinnon. This kind of feels like that type of situation. I think when you look at also Antonio Gibson, he is a terrific pass catcher out of the backfield. We know this. He was ninth in yards per route run last year. He got 353 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, and he averaged 11.1 fantasy points per game. Also, good news, J.D. McKissic is gone. So this is really his role, is to be this third down running back and somebody they can utilize all over the field. They've kind of talked a lot about him this year and how they want to get him more involved. I think he's better than Brian Robinson. I don't think Brian Robinson is actually #good at football. And when you look at Brian Robinson last year, of the 12 games he played in, only 4 where he was an RB2 or better last year. This was a guy who had 15 or more carries in 7 of the 12 games that he played. And so he just was terribly inefficient last year. Yes, obviously the injury of him being shot could have had something to do with some of this. So maybe we should give him another year to kind of see what he can do. But I think there's a real scenario here where Antonio Gibson takes over as the lead back of this backfield. I think he is the better running back. He is far more explosive. He's a terrific pass catcher, so he can do it all. And now there's no J.D. McKissic. So at the very least, I think he's a very safe floor in PPR format, something that we should be looking to target. Somebody who can be like your RB4, a plug and play type flex option on certain weeks. But I do think Antonio Gibson carries a lot of value, and his ceiling is very high. If he were to take over this backfield, I definitely think high end RB2 is definitely in his range of outcomes this year. So I really love Antonio Gibson. Next up, let's talk about Damien Harris. I don't think he's a sexy option, but he's RB37 or 105th overall. We kind of look at Devin Singletary, who now has left and has went to Houston. I don't think Devin Singletary is a great running back by any means. I think he's very much a jag. And I don't think Damien Harris is all that special of a running back either. But another player that I think you could draft, kind of be able to give you some usable weeks, I definitely think is in the range of possibility, whether that's using him through buys, whether that is using him as kind of somebody that I think could be kind of an RB2, right? I think there's a scenario where he could see kind of what he saw a couple of years ago when he had double-digit touchdowns for the Patriots. I think that is in the range of possibilities. There's been a lot of talk this offseason about Josh Allen not rushing the ball nearly as much as he has in years past to try to keep him healthy. He suffered some injuries last year. He played through them, but to kind of keep him more healthy, you can see Josh Allen run the ball less, which is where I think Damien Harris comes in. Last year he had 463 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, only 8.3 fantasy points per game. He wasn't incredibly efficient either, as 37th in yards created per touch. But we know he's probably going to be the early down back. He's probably going to be the goal line back. Now, I don't think he's going to see the same type of pass catching at work. 3.1 targets last year per game for Devin Singletary. I think that work goes to James Cook. No, I don't think James Cook is going to be a lead back. I just don't think that's in the range of outcomes for him. I think he's much more of that change of pace, 3 down back type player. And I know a lot of people really are trying to hype the narrative of James Cook this year. I am off that train. I think he's going too high. I will take the cheaper guy in Damien Harris, who I think can get me some touchdowns. I think 8 to 10 touchdowns is in the range of possibilities this year for Damien Harris, maybe 900 rushing yards. So I do think Damien Harris has RB2 upside, and going off the board at RB37, I think there's a lot of value to harvest out of that. Let's keep it moving and talk about the Bears. And I think this is an interesting situation, one we definitely need to monitor through training camp. Right now, Khalil Herbert's coming off the board at RB36 and Roschon Johnson's RB51. Now, last year, Khalil Herbert was really, really damn good. 42% of the opportunities, but 732 rushing yards, 57 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns last year for Khalil Herbert. Now he got hurt in week 10, so we didn't really get to see this come to all come to fruition. But dude was incredibly efficient last year. He was fifth in true yards per carry. He was ninth in yards created per touch, and he was 24th in breakaway run rate. This is very much like a Tony Pollard type situation last year for Khalil Herbert. No, I don't think he is Tony Pollard, but I think he has some of that sort of juice in him. And I think that Khalil Herbert, if he can win this RB1 job, could be an absolute steal, which is why I think something we're going to have to monitor through training camp and through preseason. Now, this is something they've talked about this offseason that this is kind of an open battle here right now. Khalil Herbert is believed to be the inside track to being the RB1, but I also think Roshan Johnson, who is I think also should be have some consideration here, is definitely somebody we should be taking a look at. Now, if you're not familiar with Roshan Johnson, he is 6 foot 219. Only had 93 carries, 554 rushing yards last year, but he had 6 touchdowns for Texas. Now, obviously, he was behind that one guy who drafted this year, Bijan Robinson. So he didn't really get a ton of opportunities there at Texas. But even on a smaller sample size, his 45% missed tackle force rate led all running backs in college the last 2 years. So the dude can definitely make people miss. And I think that he could be somebody that is kind of an interesting late round type of guy that you could put on your roster if you don't have Khalil Herbert, because I definitely think he has a possibility. Maybe it's not early in the year, but by the end of the season where he takes over as the lead back, often what we see from these later round running backs where they kind of finally get their opportunity to kind of break out. And fourth round draft capital for running backs these days is actually pretty solid. So I do think Roshan Johnson is a very interesting type of late round running back. And as long as he doesn't really move up much further than this, I think he's a tremendous value at where he's going because he is somebody that can be a 3 down workhorse. He is a capable pass catcher out of the backfield as well. He was 39th among all running backs last year in college football in yards per route run. He has incredible contact balance. He's not really an athletic specimen, but definitely somebody that can get the job done. So I do think Roshan Johnson is kind of an interesting pick here. And let's be honest, this regime has no real alliance to Khalil Herbert. They did not draft him. He was inherited whenever they got here. But I think he is that dude and that good that he can stave off all these other running backs. But if he can't, Roshan Johnson's the guy you're going to want. So let's keep it moving. Let's talk about Jalen Warren, RB56. I don't understand this. 156th overall. He kind of had a little mini breakout last year. 379 rushing yards, 214 receiving yards last year. He did average 2.1 targets per game and 33 targets. He also averaged 4.8 carries, only 25% of the opportunities. I think we could see a lot better here. I mean, he was very efficient. 16th in breakaway run rate, 5th in yards created per touch, 15th in yards per route run, and 18th in fantasy points per opportunity. He was really good. Kind of like we talked about Khalil Herbert kind of being Tony Pollardish. This is very much Jalen Warren. And honestly, Najee Harris is incredibly inefficient. He is a volume monster, and that's what he's dependent on. If he's not going to see that type of volume, it's going to be hard to trust Najee Harris. Najee Harris was dealing with that foot injury over the second half. He played better, but Jalen Warren, I think, has earned himself the role here, and I think he could see a bump to probably 35% of the opportunities from this backfield, possibly 40%. Maybe that's on the high side, but I think 30 to 35% of the opportunities is definitely in the range of outcomes. I think he has standalone value in PPR formats. He's definitely going to be involved with a change of pace back. I think he can definitely be involved in the passing game. And I think he's earned the right to really carve himself out a bigger role here. So, again, another player that I think has a pretty good upside here and can provide standalone value. And also, if something were to happen to Najee Harris, it'd be wheels up for Jalen Warren. So I really like Jalen Warren here as a later round guy. Next up, let's talk about Jerome Ford, RB50, 160th overall. He was basically utilized as a returner last year as a rookie. Only logged 8 carries for 12 yards last year. But GM Andrew Berry recently spoke about the thing that they were most excited about with Jerome Ford, and that was his ability as a pass catcher. We know Chubb is not heavily utilized as a pass catcher. We're hoping that he sees, a bump in targets this year, but I think it's possible he gets the Kareem Hunt role, who played 31% of the opportunities last year, 7.2 carries per game, 44 targets, 29 red zone touches last year for Kareem Hunt, and he was 17th in routes run. And so I think this is where Jerome Ford comes in, product out of Cincinnati, a very good pass catcher out of the backfield, has a lot of juice in terms of speed. He was a former track guy in high school. So there's a lot to like here with Jerome Ford. And where he's currently being drafted, I think is a little criminal. Again, somebody that could really rise through training camp and getting a lot of buzz. But I think he is definitely going to be a guy who I think could work in here and kind of have some standalone value himself as in the passing game. So wouldn't shock me if he saw around 50 targets this year in this backfield. Something very similar we saw from Kareem Hunt. So as much as I love Nick Chubb, I think Jerome Ford should definitely be on people's radars. And then lastly, let's hit on this Minnesota situation, while I do like Alexander Madison, and I do think that they paid him for a reason, and I know there's kind of a differing debate here between Alexander Madison, what people really think of him. I've talked about him. I think he is somebody that is going to see a lot of volume. This regime seems to really like Alexander Madison. But if he's not going to be the guy and he doesn't work out, because it's always in the range of possibilities that that could be the case, that if he doesn't pan out, I mean, I don't think Alexander Madison is like some special talent. He's not like a Tony Pollard type situation. Yes, we've seen him score, 20 fantasy points in 4 of the 5 when Dalvin Cook was out. But if he doesn't pan out, guys like Ty Chandler and Dwayne McBride should definitely be on your radar. This is going to be an interesting situation to monitor through training camp. Which one of these guys kind of emerges as the RB2? Because first you have Ty Chandler, who runs a sub 4.40. He has the size. He's 205 pounds. He's not necessarily big enough to be probably a true 3 down workhorse, but something that could definitely be utilized in the passing game, could definitely mix in. Didn't really get much of an opportunity. Only really played in week 18 last year. I think he had 6 carries for 20 yards. But other than that, that was basically it. But you also have Dwayne McBride, who I think is also a very, I think has a lot of intrigue as well with Dwayne McBride, somebody that I really liked coming out of the draft process. Shame that he was injured and couldn't do anything in the combine, so we have no idea there. But he is 5'10", 215, so he does have the requisite size. And another player that was very good, had over 1,700 rushing yards last year at UAB, 19 total touchdowns. He wasn't really involved in the passing game, though, so that would be kind of a concern because he only had 5 total receptions in his college career. In terms of efficiency, he had it all. So I think those would be the two guys that you'd want to monitor. I get another training camp situation that we really kind of want to keep a close eye on, because I think one of these guys could end up being somebody if Alexander Madison does not pan out. I think one of these other two running backs could definitely be somebody that we should be taking a look at. So other than that, some honorable mentions really quickly. You have Elijah Mitchell, who I RB42. I don't really quite understand that. He's definitely going to have somewhat of a role here. I don't think Christian McCaffrey is going to be handling 90% of the opportunities or anything like that. So Elijah Mitchell, if he can stay healthy, knock on wood, I definitely think has some upside here in this 49er backfield. And then you have Pierre Strong from the Patriots. I think he could be that number 2 back behind Ramondre Stevenson, which I love. And then you have Tyjae Spears, who's going to be a 4th-round pick this year. He's going to be backing up Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry's 30-plus years old. Eventually, the wheels are going to fall off of Derrick Henry. And if this is the year that it happens, Tyjae Spears would be the guy that you'd want to target. Then you have Keontae Ingram from Arizona. James Conner is getting up there in age as well. Not really an offense I like, but I do think if something were to happen to James Conner, I think Keontae Ingram would be that guy. So let me know in the comment section below who you're going to be looking for as kind of some of your late round running backs, maybe some guys that I didn't mention, or what are your thoughts on some of the players that I did mention. So let me know in the comment section below. Training camp starts in like a week. All the goodness is coming. I'm excited. I am really looking forward to rookies reporting here in about a week from now. So football season is upon us, boys and girls. Let's go. Hit that like and subscribe button for future content. We'll see you on the next one.